Hello and welcome to Red Red. Today I want to talk about the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. This is the first Rushdie book that I've read. It's one of the four books in my book club that we're reading. There's parts of this book that I really loved and some parts of it that I would say I only sort of liked, but maybe that's because they were already explored in other books that I've read and I maybe enjoyed how the themes were explored there. But overall I found that it was a very enjoyable experience, and I have a lot of notes that I've taken that I want to talk about. Keep in mind that I will be talking about sort of the whole book, so there will be spoilers. And also, before I jump into general notes or any like quotes or anything like that, a quick disclaimer. It's a bit hard to talk about the Satanic Verses without acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is the fatwa and obviously the kind of enormous calamity that resulted in Rushdie's life as a result of writing this book. If it's not obvious from the fact that I wanted to read the book and wanted to make a video about it and talk about it and sing its praise, I obviously don't support any banning of books or any of the attempts on Rushdie's life from in the past as well as recently as last year. I just wanted to say it at the start just so that I don't have to keep coming back to it and just keep adding that disclaimer because obviously we are going to be talking about things to do with the Prophet Muhammad, who's named Mahund in this book. And yeah, just so I don't need to keep coming back to it, I figured I'd say that at the start. And to give you all a general idea of what's going on with the book, is we follow two main characters. The first is Jibril Farishta, who is an Indian actor who is obviously, of course, named Jibril or Gabriel. And the second is Saladin Chamchar, the man with 1,000 voices. And Rushdie is very cool like that. I love that sort of stuff. It's a magical realism book, and I feel like so when I said that I liked it because I more loved how the ideas were explored in other books, I would say that the Satanic Verses sits pretty well in between two books. The first is one that Rushdie said he was explicitly inspired by, which is The Master and Margarita, and then the second is a book which is explicitly inspired by the Satanic Verses, which is White Teeth. So even though when it came to the magical realism and the prose style, which Rushdie's prose style, he is a master wordsmith and it is super entertaining just the whole way through. I felt like he uses a similar format as in The Master and Margarita, where we have a modern day kind of set of main characters, and then we jump back to a religious or biblical time period to explore that area. Obviously in The Master and Margarita we have our main characters and the Master, and then we jump back to Yeshua, who is Jesus, and at the Satanic Verses we have our modern day Jibril, Saladin, and then we jump back to Mahund or Muhammad. I felt like the kind of combination or the representation of the sort of Soviet Union was a little bit like the pairing of those two themes was maybe a little bit more harmonious in The Master and Margarita, although I generally preferred the Satanic Verses. In terms of addressing the themes of what it's like to be an immigrant and what it's like to deal with that experience and that discrimination in London, I think that I liked White Teeth a bit more because Smith just said, I'm not going to use any allegory, I'm not going to use any magical realism, I'm just going to look this problem dead on in the face. We're going to address this directly, even though she has a great sort of absurd style and a really rip-roaring hilarious prose. She doesn't want to she didn't use any kind of the metaphor or any of that form or structure, and so I felt like I got more out of White Teeth in that regard. However, the Satanic Verses is still great in the way that it explores both, and I think it is worthwhile, especially if you are interested specifically in addressing the kind of ideas of what it's like not only to sort of lose your culture, but to be able to want to lose it, but it still hangs on like a bad breath, which is obviously comes up over and over again in the Satanic verses, and then also just specific criticisms of Islam that come up that have, since the fatwa, become almost impossible to once again explore. So it almost is like the Satanic verses has to be the book that has explored it as best as possible, which is, even though I don't think it's the book that it has explored it as well as it possibly could, or criticized it as well as it could, it's just hard to kind of keep going or to keep talking about that, especially in light of what's happened and is still happening to Rushdie. Like I said, Rushdie's prose style is great, and also the way that he paced the book is really masterful. I think the only time I felt like a little bit of pacing issues was around in the middle. There was just a extended period where we hadn't seen Jibril for a long time. It's sort of after he passes out at the feet of Alleluia Cone, and then there's just a long period before we come back to him. But yeah, other than that, like one tiny hiccup in a 550 page book is nothing. So, still a masterful writer in terms of overall like macro structure, and also the micro structure. Again, he brings in a lot of colloquialism from Rushdie's native language, and seeing the Indian vernacular come through, especially knowing and having Indian friends myself, it's it's just cool, charming to see, and I think Rushdie does a good job with that. As it comes up, I want to talk about who or what the narrator is, but I've got a couple of quotes set aside to highlight that, so I won't go into that now. The last thing that I will talk about is where the name of the book came from. So the Satanic verses refers to a series of verses that were presented to the Muhammad that are now, after some time, thought to be kind of false, or not actually, or kind of go against the Prophet's perfectness, because specifically they highlight or they praise three gods, Allat, Al-Uzza and Manat, who come up and who are sort of characters or entities in this book. A lot of the flashback sequences with Mahund in Jahiliyyah explore Muhammad or Mahund trying to kind of convince people who still have these old gods, and there's some times when he has revelations that bring them in, because the leader of the town says, all right, as long as you bring these goddesses into your pantheon, we'll allow you to bring Islam in, and so it just addresses that temptation, which is a very real thing, and you can kind of look it up. You can see the Satanic verses, and that's where Rushdie got the name from. From there, that's pretty much all I want to talk about. There is, I'll just start talking about some quotes now. So the book starts with a hijacked airplane exploding, and the only two survivors are Jibril Farishta and Saladin Chamcha, and they are falling, and this is talking about Saladin. But at the time he had no doubt. What had taken over him was the will to live, unadulterated, irresistible, pure, and the first thing it did was to inform him that it wanted nothing to do with his pathetic personality, that half-reconstructed affair of mimicry and voices. It intended to bypass all that, and he found himself surrendering to it. Yes, go on, as if he were a bystander in his own mind, in his own body, because it began in the very center of his body and spread outwards, turning his blood to iron, changing his flesh to steel, except that it was also like a fist that enveloped him from outside, holding him in a way that was both unbearably tight and intolerably gentle. Rushdie obviously wants to give some time to highlight the kind of inner complexities of a lot of the female characters, even though, a lot of the main characters, and in a lot of in this book, most of the main characters are men, but also we're kind of seeing the negative repercussions in light of men who think that they are the center of the universe. And so this is talking about the relationship between Saladin and his wife Pamela. Saladin ends up having an affair with an Indian woman, Zini, back home, but this is talking about Pamela. He needed her so badly to reassure himself of his own existence that he never comprehended the desperation in her dazzling permanent smile, the terror in the brightness with which she faced the world, or the reason why she hid when she couldn't manage to beam. Only when it was too late did she tell him that her parents had committed suicide together when she had just begun to menstruate, over their heads in gambling debts, leaving her with an aristocratic bellow of a voice that marked her out as a golden girl, a woman of envy, whereas in fact she was abandoned, lost. Her parents couldn't even be bothered to wait and watch her grow up. That's how much she was loved. So of course she had no confidence at all, and every moment she spent in the world was full of panic. So she smiled, and maybe once a week she locked the door and shook and felt like a husk, like an empty peanut shell, like a monkey without a nut. One of the questions that I think is kind of teased is, who is the narrator? And a little bit early on, around page 93 of this edition, I started to have a bit of an inclination as to who it is, and we end up having a scene later on where a figure or a character comes to Jabril, and it's a supreme being, but Jabril doesn't know if it is the good one or the bad one, and the supreme being kind of criticizes him for saying, why does it have to be one or the other? However, my belief is that the narrator is Satan. The first time we have an example of this, the book is mostly written in the third person, but we occasionally have first person interruptions. And here on page 93, it says, "I know, devil talk, shaitan interrupting Jabril. Me? Question mark." And later on we have another example that more explicitly points in favor of it being Satan or Shaitan as the narrator. A cool connection that is made between past and present day is that in the past we have a character named Baal who serves as a sort of anti-Mahund and is resisting a lot of the because Baal is a poet who sings the praises of the old pre-Islamic Arabian goddesses, and there's actually a connection that's made between Baal and modern day Jumpy Joshi, where back talking about Baal, someone says, "A poet's work is to name the unnameable, to point at frauds, to take sides, start arguments, shape the world, and stop it from going to sleep. And if rivers of blood flow from the cuts his verses inflict, then they will nourish him. He is the satirist Baal." And so rivers of blood is also used as a phrase to talk about the poetry that the modern Jumpy Joshi is writing. Okay, so a cool theme that comes up. In present day, Jabril is suffering from a psychosis. Part of that is being caused by the fact that when he goes to sleep, he appears in visions talking to the Prophet Mahund as the angel Gabriel or Jabril. However, he is experiencing this duality of seeing the movements of the angel being acted out, but also just being modern, regular, everyday Indian actor dude. And Jabril writes this: "Muhammad comes to me for revelation, asking me to choose between monotheist and henotheist alternatives, and I'm just some idiot actor having a banshee nightmare. What the fuck do I know, yeah? What to tell you? Help, help." And exploring that a little bit more deeply, the Supreme Being keeps away. What keeps returning is this scene, the entranced prophet, the extrusion, the cord of light, and then Jabril in his dual role is both above looking down and below staring up, and both of them scared out of their minds by the transcendence of it. Jabril feels paralyzed by the presence of the prophet, by his greatness, thinks, "I can't make a sound, I'd seem such a goddamn fool." Hamza's advice, "Never show your fear." Archangels need such advice as well as water carriers. And then another kind of fun joke about, or maybe a reference as to the fact that the narrator, I believe, is Satan, is they're talking again about the Great Fall and how the Great Fall changed Jabril and Saladin, and then the narrator writes, "And another thing, let's be clear, Great Falls change people. You think they fell a long way? In the matter of tumbles, I yield pride of place to no personage, whether mortal or immortal." And also it's like the Satanic verses, like the name of the book, the verses of Satan, and Satan's, like the book itself. It's, yeah. One of the things that I like is that Rushdie, in a kind of oblique way, really still makes it a very core part of his book, where he's talking about police brutality and some of the crimes that are committed against minorities and people of color. One of the first big ones is that when Jabril and Saladin fall, they land on a beach. Jabril goes and lives with this old woman, and it is this kind of weird relationship that I guess is mirroring the Prophet Muhammad having a wife that is very that was much older than him. However, Saladin gets arrested because he is thought of as being an illegal alien. He is tortured by these 9 police officers in this truck, and then at some point Saladin just screams out, like, look me up, I'm in the computers, I'm in the system. They look him up, they find out he is British citizen first class, and then the 4 of them essentially plot and scheme and say, oh, we'll just say that he attacked us. We'll say it's 9 against 1. Those other 2 were out to lunch. They're not going to say anything. We just first thing we got to do is get him unconscious so that when we get to the detention center, we can do all the talking. And so that's a start of it. And then it essentially seems to climax where in one of the last chapters of the book, or one of the last big sections or books, there's, on the surface, there's this magical realism confrontation of angel and devil going on between Saladin and Jibril. Meanwhile, in the background, and probably all that's actually really happening, is that there's a giant race riot that has been caused by a man named Simba who was murdered in a prison cell. And so Rushdie, even though he's not explicitly talking about it, and it can be a bit of a blink and you'll miss it because you're so focused on the magical realism elements, he definitely wanted to bring that into the book, and I think it works well and rewards kind of rethinking about. One of the things that fuels Saladin's kind of hatred of being in London, or London, which is a kind of phrase that I felt like it slightly overstayed its welcome, but anyway, it's whatever, is that he has this idea of Saladin sort of glorified London because it was just the place that he escaped from India to, and so and then as he moves back and he's experiencing a lot of this discrimination, there's obviously this kind of loss of the illusion and not being able to indulge in it, and he's seeing that with a character named Billy, who is really just not a nice dude, basically breaking laws. But then when Saladin is talking to these 2 characters, Mishal and Anahita Sufyan, who are basically living in the place that he is staying while he's recovering from the fact that he has miraculously grown horns and satyr hooves and is hairy and has an enlarged dong, Chamchar realizes that I am a man who does not know the score, living in an amoral, survivalistic, get-away-with-it world. Mishal and Anahita Sufyan, who still unaccountably treated him like a kind of soulmate, in spite of all his attempts to dissuade them, were beings who plainly admired such creatures as moonlighters, shoplifters, filchers, scam artists in general. He corrected himself. Not admired, that wasn't it. Neither girl would ever steal a pin, but they saw such persons as representatives of the gestalt of how it was. One of the things I think that drew Alleluia Cone to Jibril is that both of them, in a certain way, have experienced a transcendence. And Alleluia Cone, she climbed Everest, and this is what she writes about it. Everest silences you. When you come down, nothing seems worth saying, nothing at all. You find the nothingness wrapping you up like a sound, non-being. You can't keep it up, of course. The world rushes in soon enough. What shuts you up is, I think, the sight you've had of perfection. Why speak if you can't manage perfect thoughts, perfect sentences? It feels like a betrayal of what you've been through. But it fades. You accept that certain compromises, closures, are required if you're to continue. Okay, and so perhaps in a way of just completely owning what this character is, the character who is critical of Mahund back in Jahiliya is also named Salman. Again, I said I wasn't going to come back to it, but this has to be some of what it ignited the anger that caused the fatwa. What finally finished Salman with Mahund, the question of the women, and of the satanic verses. Listen, I'm no gossip, Salman drunkenly confided, but after his wife's death, Mahund was no angel, you understand my meaning? But in Yathrib, he almost met his match. Those women up there, they turned his beard half wide in a year. The point about our prophet, my dear Baal, is that he didn't like his women to answer back. He went for mothers and daughters. Think of his first wife and then Aisha, too old and too young, his 2 loves. He didn't like to pick on someone his own size, but in Yathrib, the women are different and you don't know. Here in Jahiliya, you're used to ordering your females about, but up there they won't put up with it. Well, our girls were beginning to go for that type of thing, getting who knows what sorts of ideas in their head. So at once, bang, out comes the rule book. The angel starts pouring out rules about what women mustn't do. He starts forcing them back into docile attitudes the prophet prefers, docile or maternal, walking 3 steps behind, or sitting at home being wise and waxing their chins. How the women of Yathrib laughed at the faithful, I swear, but that man is a magician. Nobody could resist his charm. The faithful women did as he ordered them. They submitted. He was offering them paradise after all. In an absolutely balls to the wall, just like no fear Rushdie, he has this section where Baal is hiding out in this brothel, and so even though Mahund has come and is bringing Islam in order to sort of slowly work in the tenets of Islam that he wants to introduce to the town, he's leaving the brothels open for a little bit. Baal is hiding in there, and then as a way of sort of igniting the passions of the people who are living there, there are 12 prostitutes there who pretend that they adopt the names of the wives of the prophet, and it is just this like absolutely like red hot way, but it's just so clever, and I'm like, man, you reached for fire, Rushdie, and I think it was worth it. Like literally, I think it was worth it, but man, he was playing with fire with that one. This is Jibril in the sort of throes of dealing with his mental illness, and the reason I highlighted this section was because it actually hit in light of having recently read Ryunosuke Akutagawa's book, because Jibril says, "When I get sick of being this way, I just cut down without telling her, and then the shit starts happening. I swear to you, Spoono, I can't bear the bloody idea that it will never stop, that the only choice is drugs or bugs in the brain. I can't bloody bear it." And yeah, there's I recently made a video called on the book In Dreams, which is the short fictions of Ryunosuke Akutagawa, and he talks about, obviously Ryunosuke Akutagawa was also suffered very strongly from mental illness, and he talked about in the throes of his kind of anxiety and depression, he felt like lice were crawling in the folds of his brain. Even though I do have some more things highlighted, just looking at the end of the book, I kind of actually want to leave it because I don't think I've spoiled that much, surprisingly, even though I've been going on for quite a while. And yeah, I'll leave the book till the end. The only thing that I do want to say is that there is, of all the allegedly unforgivable things that occurred in this book, there is only one that I think is truly not on and unacceptable, and it is that on page 459, for whatever, just looking at it again is making me seethe with ire. Rushdie decided to make a pun of Babylon and London by writing Babylondon, and man, I loved so much of this book, but I just can't look at Babylondon without cringing. It's like, it makes sense in the context, but just seeing like a one-word sentence of Babylondon, like, oh man, alive, can't do it. Anyway, those are some of the thoughts that I had on the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. I've been told that another book of his that I should read is Midnight's Children, which is apparently like one of his best books. I'd love to get some other suggestions of some other Rushdie books that you recommend, or even some other books similar to this. Thanks for watching. I know it was a long video, but I hope you all enjoyed. I hope I convinced you to read Satanic Verses if you haven't already. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video.